Okay, so welcome all. This is what our 74th PC Open discussion, and I'm hoping that today we'll complete this about the customer approval code that we have been writing from last 2, 3 meetings. And then at the end, I would like to spend some time or block some time to talk about what next. I have one idea which I'm kind of trying to do because that's a very common requirement in the upgrade world when people come from nav. So maybe that's something we all can do together, or otherwise we'll think about something else. So Maya, let's talk about this first, and then we'll talk about what next. So let's talk about the normals, where you register every week. If you are not a default attendee, you go to this page, BC Open Discussion, and you register here. Otherwise, if you are in the meeting, you can drop your name and email on chat, and I'll make sure you get invited going forward. So what we were discussing is this, and this is what we were able to achieve last week. And this all was pending. Because we didn't talk about it, I didn't write one thing, but that makes sense now when I looked at one of the pull requests that came forward. So let me see where my GitHub is, and let's go there. Okay, here it is. So during last week, I saw so many pull requests. Sorry, forking of the branch, which made me a little bit happy. Then this seems that this is the way we wanted to go ahead. People did clone the project, uh, but when it comes to kind of submitting it back, and I guess that's what my point is. Even if you have done a little bit, which you're not sure about, at least let's commit it so that it helps us to understand the perspective, and it will help you if you miss something. So it's not about good or bad development. Everybody thinks that he or she does a great development. I always feel like that, but then I meet some people and see their code, and then I think about how I would have written it, which might have been completely wrong or maybe completely right. So I guess if you can commit your code, create pull requests after you have done, it'll help us to understand the way you are thinking that you'll approach this, and maybe we'll learn something when we see your code. Anybody has any challenges in terms of doing pull requests or anything, let us know in the meeting, and maybe we can go about it again if required. But uh, I just saw one pull request from Sandeep sir, so let's go ahead and start maybe understanding from Sandeep sir what was the intention, what all he did. And then in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, that'll be great. You know, so Sandeep said I'll kind of collapse these dictionary ones because these are kind of not required more or less. So let's talk about this code unit because we are trying. The first thing I guess you have written is about the check status on sales document release.
Yes.
Right. So is it visible? Should I zoom out or zoom
Yeah,
in?
well, I use a big screen, so it's visible for me. I don't know about others.
Okay.
Fine.
So Sandeep sir, you use the on code on after check customer created in the release sales document. Anyone
Yes.
else thinks about a better event? And I'll open this in VS Code where it is. Anyone else can think of a better place, guys? Or anyone have any confusions around this trigger? And what Sandeep sir is trying to do is making sure that I guess it is only applicable to non-code documents. Is that what I'm
Yep.
reading?
Because code can be created without customer,
Yes.
only on contacts.
Okay. And then you have a function where you are trying to check the restrictions for build to as well as for sell to.
Yes.
So let's see where that event is in the code. Okay, and it seems, is it specific to, oh, you're checking on the release. Okay, okay, I should open the release one first, which is 414, if I remember it correctly.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let me find this event. And what we are talking about is this. This is the event that is being called to handle that situation, which is on the code section. And okay, it did test the sell to customer number here already. Let's see what this one does. The test fields a customer number. So maybe Sandeep sir, you can remove that condition, I guess, about the sell to customer number, because that's kind of getting validated here. There's a test field already here.
Mm, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then we have this. So what we are checking here is that a capability that he should not be able to release the order unless it is in the restricted record. So the customer should not be in the restricted record, more or less. You know,
Yeah. That's a whole idea. Because when you do approvals, send for approval, it creates a record restriction.
right. Okay. Anyone thoughts? Any other thoughts? Any questions around it about this event? Okay, it seems no. So let's talk about the second situation, which was one of the requirement that the customers should kind of get be open if the bank account is bank account number is changed. I guess that was Vijay's suggestion. I guess if I'm
Mm.
remembering it correct.
So what I did was actually on insert, modify and delete all three. So anything that is done on the customer bank account, customer should get reopened.
Okay, so anyone have any other thoughts? Because while I was writing it, Sandeep said maybe I found a better one. So maybe we'll look at that. Uh, so what I did, Sandeep said, is, and we can debate about it, is here on the customer bank account. I just wanted to check at the point of when the bank account number is changed, because I guess Vijay's request was, and he's not here today, was it specifically about bank account number? So I didn't want to check about other fields, you know. So if the bank account number is changed, and maybe I got it a little bit wrong, but this is what my assumption was, that if it is same, then don't do anything, and if it is changed, then you just modify the status back to open.
Mm, will it take care if the record is deleted? No.
No, no. It will only, because I was thinking from the perspective of what Vijay said, which was if the bank account number is changed. So maybe I was stuck on that field while I was, thinking to write about it, and that was running on my mind. But yeah,
What
the
I was
other,
thinking was, see this field, though we are using in this example for customer, this the practical usage is in the case of vendor, where you have
right,
to make payments to the wire payments to the vendors if you have some integration. Now the concern here is if that vendor has got multiple bank accounts and somebody deletes one, the preferred bank account,
hmm,
then the status will still remain released because that field will not be triggered.
okay,
That was the reason I thought of doing this.
okay. Anyone thinks
Again,
different? Yeah, that's okay.
yeah,
That's what we are discussing again. Anyone thinks any issues or any better way to kind of handle this? Because I have one suggestion, and maybe that's useful for everybody while we are talking about these. Okay, nothing. So let me copy this piece here and talk about what I was thinking and what I always do. And maybe I'll learn something. So if this is the event that I'm subscribing, and especially the insert, modify, and especially the delete. Uh, Whenever we do that, there is also an additional parameter which is available, which is called as run trigger. Now it actually kind of being used in some specific situations, but I prefer to use this all the time. Now the meaning of this run trigger parameter, which gets exposed only on insert, modify, and delete, if I'm not wrong, is to make sure when your code runs. And the difference would be that a code somewhere calling insert or a code calling insert true. Run trigger true means insert true is called. Run trigger false means only insert is called, which is by default is false. Now think of a situation and especially about sales line. So before it actually posts the sales line, if there is a rounding that's required, system by default behind the scene creates a temporary sales line. That's one of the situation where one of our developer who wrote a similar kind of code broke while the system was trying to post the sales order, because he was trying to do some checks or some updates on the sales line whenever the insert is called, and he forgot the run trigger. So when the temporary lines were created, his code was also called, which was causing error because it was trying to do a get, which was kind of failing somewhere because it was a temporary record that is being dealt with. So I prefer to use something like this on these trigger, that if not run trigger, then bye bye. Which means if for some reason, and we understand as a developer community that when people write inserts, modify, and delete, at least in the business central world, they will differentiate between these two statements. We all understand what happens when insert true is called. We all understand what happens when insert blank is called. So if you want to deal with situations like this, you should always try to look for this, which will be available on inserts, modifies, and deletes. Because in some cases, there might be a temporary record created and then deleted or modified to achieve something, let's say in a report or somewhere. And that in a subscriber, you can handle using this parameter.
Good
Questions,
learning.
thoughts?
In fact, this would have saved me modification on the table extension.
Yes. Right. So so many developer ignore it, as in our team also sometimes, because it's kind of hidden and people don't understand it more or less. But when you read about it on internet, find it on MSDN, you'll understand how important the run trigger becomes in situations. Okay. Any other thoughts? Or we move ahead? Okay. I'll just for the time being remove this, and we'll go back here. Uh-oh. Okay. Now that you handled the bank account changes, anywhere that happens, it calls one function which updates the customer status field. Then we have the default dimension change. And here you had the similar kind of logic, right? It seems.
Yes, same logic.
Yeah, and I guess so people who did remember this, this came from whom? I forgot. Somebody said that while we are doing this, if a default dimension for a customer changes, we should kind of block that customer again. So this is what it was. Now let's see what I did, because I was able to maybe figure out a better event for it. Okay, here it is. So my code is here. One method, which is on update customer global dimension on before customer modify. So when you go into this code unit, because I was initially trying, and I guess I surely did write it initially, but then I changed my mind because when I went into, let's go back on insert. When I went into on delete first, it was doing where it is doing that. I'm pretty sure I saw it somewhere. Okay, on modify, update global dim doc. Yes, here it is. So this is the method that's called everywhere. On delete, there is the update, but it's conditional. Oh, yeah, I didn't saw that. That's my mistake because it will only be called on case of dimension 1 and 2. I should not have missed this. I completely missed it because I was trying to see is there a method which can handle all those situations, and I ended up going to this method. When I went to this method, it was doing things per table wise, and then I said, oh, there is especially a method available for customers. When I went inside there, I saw even this, and this is I was trying to call, but then it will only be called for dimension 1 and 2. So I was completely wrong there.
Yeah, can we look this on update global dim code? This must be also getting called from somewhere.
This one?
The event just before this year.
No, so this is else. So this will only be called, this method is only called, so this method is only looking for 1, 2, and else situation, but this function is called from only one place because it's a local function. This is the only place where it is being called from. 3, 4, 6. So yeah, so this will not be called anywhere else. Now,
Okay.
sir, oh, this is a global method. So
Global
this
method,
might,
na? That's what I
yeah,
was
this
looking
main.
for.
So this main method might have been called from somewhere else, which I don't have any kind of idea. I don't have Prism for AL. Let's put it this way. But yeah, I completely missed that. I should have looked while coding my subscriber that it is only being called in case of dimension 1 and dimension 2. But what I was trying to do is trying to figure out a way where I can handle all these situation via one subscriber or subscribing to one event, which seems a wrong approach at this point for sure. Okay, so I'll remove my code and I'll use Sandeep sir code here to kind of merge it into master later. So these three subscribers will handle our default dimension change, and that will change the status of customer to open. That's what one of our requirement was when we were discussing about it. Now here comes the interesting part of workflow handling. So let's quickly review what we were trying to do. Uh, we did not check Sandeep sir, I guess, during posting yet. Is there
No,
a
your first code will work, na? The original lines.
that's for release, right? I
Uh,
released the order and then I didn't post it for a while, let's say for a week. In the meantime, customer was kind of, you know, um, uh, had some dimension change and it was changed to open again. So
mhm.
that customer will also be required to be checked during posting because it's already released and approved. It will
Can you
never
do?
go into that cycle.
Yeah. Can you go to the code unit?
Okay.
The code, the original section which you have written, the first function, the first call. This will work.
On, oh, yeah. Okay. Right.
I
I,
wrote code, and since I got the error on this field itself, I removed my code.
oh, okay. I completely forgot about this that we wrote this last week. So yeah, this gets called during posting. So this will kind of check that is my customer is released at that point or not. That makes sense. So we have done this, we have done this one, we have done this one also, and the last is during approval. So now there are two cycles. As soon as the customer is created, it gets an status open. If a user tries to create a sales order from that customer, it'll let it create, but he cannot release it. He cannot post it until unless the approval for that customer is completed and is the status changed to released. The customer will also get open again if there is a change in the bank account or the default dimension of that customer. So now what is remaining is to handle the workflow part, which have two things. One is when the request is sent, it should change to pending approval. And when it is approved, then it should change to released on our customer record. So let's go down there where you have written it. So here it is, approval management on send customer for approval. Update status for approval, and we are setting it up for pending approval, and this gets modified. Okay, anyone, any thoughts, questions around this one, this event? And guys, if you have questions, do ask them. In the whole idea of doing dev together, had my only intention was that we engage more, and we, if there are question or better way that you can think of, we kind of discuss those in these meetings. Okay. I did see that event, but I don't find where it is being tagged. So I did see that there is an event on send customer for approval, but where it is being tagged is important, I guess. So let me search this, and this is no. Where is this invoked from? I guess.
I believe from
Oh,
workflow
from the
event handling.
workflow event handling. Yeah. Okay. So those who haven't worked with workflow have two major code units in system. One is workflow event handling, and one is workflow response handling. And those had been there for as long as workflow existed in NAV or Business Central. Am I writing something wrong? Oh, yeah. So one is event handling, which is technically speaking, let me open my Business Central so that we can see that. Okay. So when we talk about workflows, and you don't have to confuse it with the events in programming, but when you talk about workflow also have two things. One is a workflow event, and based on these event when they occur in system, there are certain responses that gets executed. So these are workflow events, and these are workflow responses. A event can have one or more responses. Like this event have three responses, and they will happen sequentially. And then to limit the scope of workflow, there is also a conditional section where you can define that, okay, not all customer goes through approval. I want to limit them, let's say, based on payment method code, or based on region, or based on country field. You can apply those filters to kind of limit the records that get into approval. So what we are seeing right now on the code is the workflow event code unit, which kind of lists down all these events, not in this manner, but there's a different architecture code wise how these events are listed. So that's where Sandeep sir have used or picked that event from. So let's look for that event. Okay, so here it is that gets subscribed. that event which handles the event for send customer for approval. Okay, it's defined here, and oh, that's how it's handling it. Okay, now
So
this
this is
is,
basically coming from approvals management.
yeah. So this one should be a text field somewhere, if I'm not wrong. Let me see. Yes. So this returns run workflow on send customer for approval, which are kind of predefined text in your this code unit. So let's see how Sandeep sir have used it. Where is that? Okay, there it is. So whenever a approval is requested for a customer, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to change the status it to pending approval, and then the customer gets modified there. Uh, just in theory, as I talked earlier about the run trigger, I prefer to use modified true, anywhere in the system now, because I understand how other subscriber will impact based on how I have written it,
Mm,
right? Or,
But
or any kind.
will it create change log entries with or without true?
Uh, that's a good question. Change log doesn't happen based on that, I guess. Change log happens based on the global system code units on database insert, modify, and all.
Then yes, then I should have
Yeah,
written true.
right. That because change log, when the date record actually gets committed into the database, then these database events are called, which was earlier placed in code unit 1, I guess, or 41 back then. And when those events are called, then the change log picks its entries. Okay, so this is when the kind of a customer goes for approval, the status change back to pending approval. And when somebody cancels an approval request, then it changes back to open. And then the other code unit that I was talking about is the response handling. And
This requires
technically,
a tweak.
this requires a tweak.
Yeah,
Uh,
on the
let's see
front
that.
end. Can you go to the workflow?
Okay, let me just filter this and I'll go into workflow.
Front end, the browser.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. So in the second line, an approval request is approved, pending approval is 0. I clicked on this, remove record restriction,
Mm-hmm.
add more responses, release the document, added one more response.
Okay, and then you handle that. Okay, and
Yes.
we'll talk about it in a while, guys. Um, so let's see this, because whenever you're working with workflow, you'll end up with workflow response, not table, my bad. Workflow response code unit for sure. And you should only, if you are looking where the response kind of goes, you should come directly to a method called execute response. This is the method which does all kind of responses that you see in any workflow in a standard Microsoft. It has everything: do nothing, create notification, release a document that Sandeep sir was saying, on document code, pending approval, comment code. All the responses are here. So you'll get an idea whenever you're trying to customize workflows for some reason, the response part will be, all the responses, how the code is done, you'll find in this workflow response handling, and all the events you will find into the workflow events code unit. So whenever you're doing this and you have to kind of do customize, like Sandeep said, I've done on this one, you will end up into seeing which event I need to find based on this code unit. So like the default response that we saw in this was remove record restrictions, and I actually use this in these, so I'll also walk through that as we talk about it. So, and let's see Sandeep's code, then we'll get into this. So what Sandeep said I've done is on release document. So there will be an event which is on the release of document, which is on this method somewhere. Okay, here it is. So what it tries to do, it checks for approval entry, which is
And the
most,
last one, else
yeah,
begin.
yeah. So technically speaking, the way I thought about it, and maybe I'll talk about it later, is this one, you use this scenario, right? On release
Yes.
document.
Yes.
And this is the people who don't know about it, I guess. This is the another benefit of using the NMs over options, as in not this scenario, but when you had options, you have a limited option of A, B, and C. You can't do anything if your option string, if Microsoft would have extended option string some way, we would not be able to find this situation. With enums, that's kind of possible that they can give you an else and then get into enum extension, which is easy to find, and then you handle your situation there. So you use this one to kind of handle the situation of, am I on the right one? Yeah, on the workflow responses, and you said, okay, if it is not 18, you exit it, then you get the field one based on which you got the customer, and you change the status.
And the
Now, people,
important thing, handled is equal to true.
yeah, the
Sorry.
handle is equal to true, and maybe that's an important thing, and maybe not everybody knows about it. So let's talk about it for a while. When you see events from Microsoft that are exposed into the system, I kind of classify them, Microsoft classifies them into business event and integration event. Technical difference between those two events from Microsoft is a business event comes up with a guarantee that Microsoft will not change this event in future releases. Now, how many business events are there? I haven't recently checked it, but I know till Business Central 15 there were none, which means a guarantee that it will never change its definition. The other classification that Microsoft does is an integration definition, where the definition of that event, which means what methods or what parameters it's exposing, may change into the future. I also classify them based on is there a pattern handled or not. And now there is a, I normally, whenever I request an event from Microsoft or from an ISV, I always tell them I need a event of type handled. And this might not be a better case. You might want to see code unit 22. Let me see if I find something on code unit 22. Because those are the situations where you will require events with handled flag. So let's see if there is one. So, okay. So now this is the situation, run with check when your item general post line is called. So while you are here on this code unit and you don't want to run Microsoft code, think about it. Even if there is an event, you can't stop Microsoft code from being executed. That's where the handled pattern comment came into picture. That Microsoft, I know what you're trying to do, but my customer has a different approach of handling the situation. And that's where they said, oh, our event that's available in this area will also have a is handled pattern. And as soon as this event will, being called and you set this boolean to true, if this gets true, I'll not execute any of my code. Then you handle everything from here onwards the way your customer wants it. There are situations, as in I haven't surely used it in item general post 9 for sure, but there are situations where you want to skip some of the Microsoft code based on your customer business, and that's only possible if the event that's available there have a handled pattern. So whenever you subscribe to this, there are two rules that I have learned with time from different developers as I post my code somewhere on GitHub mostly. The first rule is that you should always check is handled is true. And if it is true, that means someone else have already handled it. And if they have handled it, then technically speaking, you should not re-handle it because it's being handled. So the first thing is the way Microsoft does it, you will have this as the first in your subscriber, that if it is already handled, then sorry, somebody have already handled it. I don't want to do it. And at the end, you need to make sure that you do is handled true, not false. This is what Microsoft is doing, which makes sense because they want to check here what happens. They set it to false. Is it still false? If it is false, then execute Microsoft code. If it is true, then Microsoft will skip their code. Thoughts, questions before we go back to that code?
Yeah, there are a lot of scenarios where you have to skip Microsoft code, particularly 22,
Yeah.
where you have got customization in say manufacturing area.
Yes.
Or one thing we did for one of the customer where they were buying items, but they doesn't have to go in the inventory at all. No item ledger entry because
Oh,
the inventory didn't belong to them. So kind of a
okay.
non-inventory, but they didn't want any transactions at all.
Okay. Yeah, I have seen those situations for sure. And that's where whenever you request to even think about it, either from Microsoft or from an ISV, what kind of event you actually need? Do you want to execute certain Microsoft code after that? Because there are situations where your customer code is sitting in between Microsoft code. So before requesting, make sure that you know that after the event also Microsoft code will run. And do you want that or not? Microsoft requires a scenario when you request an event, but you know, uh, making it more clear and specific about your request helps Microsoft also to kind of add those kind of events. So that's what Sandeep sir was talking about, that he did handle the event here after calling this. And because it was handled, there was no errors that popped up. So let's see that. This is the check that it is for the customer table or not. This approval entry that's coming in, is it for customer? Then based on the field reference, he tried to get the value of the field one, which in case of customer is the customer number, which is the primary key. And then based on that, he gets a customer, he changes the status to release, modify and handle true. One quick thought again, I prefer, even I know that this is a field in my extension, I prefer to validate it because there can be other people in with the same customer who might take a dependency on my extension, and they might write something on the validate of my field. And I guess this gets important as we get into this business central world, right? Because earlier everything was an object, and whosoever will work on it can see that object and what code is written. But if I make this extension as, where people can take references on it, then people can actually have a on validate subscriber to this field, and they can write situations around this, which I might not have thought about. And maybe I'm not sharing that code with my customer. Maybe this is an app. I need to kind of think from the extension part on my extension also. So, you know, try trues on inserts and modify, try validates, even if it's your field, because now it's on a bigger platform where other developers from other partners may take a reference or may take a dependency on your extension, and they might do something like, there can be an other uh, extension on top of this extension, and they can kind of subscribe to my customer table, which let's do that here. They might do a sub on this, and they say this as database customer, and then they say on validate, after validate, oh no, okay, on after validate event, and then they will pick my field, which is BOD status. Another rule that you might be seeing, and I don't know what others are using, I have seen some customer code in case of transition customers that we have, that some people set it to true, which is incorrect thing, and maybe after this we'll talk about it. So if somebody is, let's say, saying that if the, let me have the parameters here, rec, next set. So if the rec dot BOD status is not equal to extract dot BOD status, that means it have changed somehow. Then let's say update my field or whatever they want to do, or maybe send an email, or maybe delete a sub record. They can do anything here, but because in my code I forgot to do a validate, this event will be irrelevant in that situation. That is written by someone else. So in the Business Central space, whenever we are coding, we should always be open to an approach that somebody may take a dependency on my extension and may, add more to it what I have done. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I was talking about before we move ahead is about these last two parameters. You should never skip on a missing license, which means you're saying that if the customer license doesn't allow kind of have permission to this object, you skip this code. Don't call the subscriber, whatever written inside it, which means customer will not even know that the code that you have written as a subscriber have ever executed. And on the similar line, skip on missing permission. So in that case, if Avinav as a user don't have permission to run this object, for Avinav, it'll just skip it, this code segment, which technically speaking, at least on the per tenant scope, what most of us write, it doesn't make any sense that the code or the subscriber should skip in any situation. So make it a thumb rule, whatever you are using. If you have different opinion, let's talk about it. That's my understanding. That I always keep it as Sandeep said, I've kept it false everywhere. I don't set it to true in any situations. One more thing when we are talking about subscriber, people who have done eventing in CAL, and because this was a limitation of CAL, they always try to add whatever is available on that event, because that's what Microsoft did back then in the NAV world. They always expose everything as a parameter in Business Central space. In AL language, you don't have to do that. You only need to call or use that parameter that you need. Like we only need customer in this situation. I only referred that variable. So if you don't need it, and technically speaking, people who were evented more or less in nav space in Business Central 13 or 14, when you convert their code, you see a long chain of it here. All the parameters are kind of here. The only problem happens is if Microsoft changes the definition and you have that parameter used or defined here, and tomorrow if Microsoft removes it, even if it's not used anywhere, it will turn into an error in your extension. So keep it clean as much as you can. Only add the parameters that you need in your code going forward. If you don't need it, then just remove it. It also helps in the readability of code, right? Okay. So this is how you handle it. You change it to release. And let's see, I tried it. And maybe my attempt was very bad, but let's have a look. I did a different method, I guess. I used this event on before allow record uses default. And let's see where that is. So what I said is I don't want to change anything on the front end, but anytime this event is called, and this will be called from this situation. Where is my client? Here. Remove record restriction will call this method.
A small problem.
Yes, sir.
Can you go to that workflow in the browser?
Yes, sir.
Uh, Press escape.
Okay.
This is also called on cancel.
What?
That's a
Uh,
problem. I used it initially on the right side. Yeah.
okay. So yeah,
So
and I was
I will
trying.
have a loophole. I will send the request. I will cancel, and my customer will be released.
Great. And this is bad, yeah, because the way I was trying to do it is there is this code unit which I love, and if you're not using it in your code somewhere, until unless you are dealing with regref and field refs, it's always a problem. But there is this cool code unit called data type management, and this have some cool, at least two cool methods which I know. One is to get record ref. You can pass it a record, you can pass it a variant, oh sorry, a record ref or a record ID. And what it'll do internally is it'll return you the record reference out of any of these three types. And like we needed field, as you have also used it, Sandeep sir, there is this
Mm.
another method which again you can pass anything as a record, if a record ref or a record ID, and the field number that you need, and based on that it returns you the record ref as well as the field ref back. So I use this one, and based on this I got my field back, and I prefer using this because in the AL word changing the field ID is not destructive. So there
Yeah.
is an option that somebody will tomorrow come and change it to 60,000. So I didn't want it to make it static, so I use the field number method which will return whatever the current field number is, and then the record ref, and then based on this returned record ref I check, is it the customer table? If it is, I should have written not, my bad. If it is not customer, then it goes out and it says I don't want to do anything. Otherwise it picks the field ref that has been written and validate that field ref with the released status, and then modifies the record ref.
This was more or less my code, the way I wrote it, though I've
Yes.
never used this data type management. But the problem is the cancellation.
The event, yeah, the event. Oh yeah, I actually didn't get time to kind of run this, but yeah, there are some cool methods into it. If you ever get into a situation where you're confused about rec refs and field refs, I always come and read through this. And people who are still working on NAV or Business Central 13 and 14, I'm pretty sure this is there on 14. I'm not sure before that it's available or not. But this one is a super cool one. Read about it. There is this one which I've used once. I don't remember where, but then it makes it super simple for so many situations. But okay, so I was completely wrong as I said. So we'll come back here, and this is what happens when the approval request is sent and approved. So it's handled here, and these are the two methods that were being used in the situations above. And this is what, oh, on after modify. Yes, this is another thing that I wanted to talk about before we end today. When you have a table extension defined, there are multiple ways of writing your event subscriber. But if you already have a table extension defined, then I prefer to keep my related code in the table extension. So as you can see here, there are 6 triggers which are available on your table extension. So if you do T trigger on table extension, you will find on after delete, on after insert, rename, and then before of all these. So you can actually handle, instead of subscribing it in a code unit for customer table, if you have an extension table, you can handle these situations here itself. You don't have to, just for this, you don't have to separately create a code unit per se. So let's see what you have done there, what you have changed there. Record has been modified and it's okay. If the status is released, then change it to open and then modify a message. And I didn't add anything
This is
before there.
this is for considering the scenario if the record is already under approval, then if any modification is done, then the final approving authority will see it and do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. If someone changes something, he also gets a message that it has been set to open. You need to send it to approval, which makes complete sense. So this last code that we are seeing was part of this requirement that whenever a customer is modified, and you know, so this one handles that situation. So what I'm going to do, as we talked about, few of the changes Sandeep said, if you're okay with it, I'll make some small changes that we have talked about during this meeting.
Sure.
And then the code will be available for everyone on the repo, whosoever want to kind of use this. So where you do that? Okay.
A small question for you.
Yes, sir.
If I have to send this customer approval to 5 or 6 users, or maybe say 2, 3 users, how can I do that? How do you handle it? And they are
Um,
not in a specific sequence, so it's not key. The approver, I cannot use that approver mechanism in the
and
work.
that's okay. That one is you want to send it to 5 or 6 people, but what happens in terms of approval? Anybody can approve it,
No,
or you need a specific.
it's a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Then can we do it with the user group, workflow
Yeah,
user group?
fine. So, in fact, in one of the meetings earlier, you said it cannot follow this. Multiple users cannot be defined in these approvals. I was confused. Maybe I heard it wrong,
No, I
but
was specifically talking about here where it is. When you
add record
request.
section. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was kind of trying to talk about this situation that what you can use if because salesperson purchaser cannot be used in case of customer. Approver or workflow user group are the only options,
Okay.
right? And even here in approver, you can't be using approver chain because that's not possible. Direct approver is possible. First qualified, let me think about it. No, not possible because it looks it from the amount perspective. That how much is
Yes.
the amount of it. Specific approver will work, and then based on different situations,
Yeah.
the 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 option changes. But I guess the situation that you're talking about, I'm pretty sure that's possible here on this
Yeah.
case.
That's what we use. I was
Yeah,
surprised at that time when you said multiple cannot be done. So I was maybe I heard it wrong.
yeah. I maybe I said it, and because my intention at that point was to kind of don't go into the sales and purchase approval because the
Okay.
possibility there is kind of there are more possibility you can have a chain of approver where based on amounts it goes to 5 people or 1 people, right? So yeah, maybe I said it in this context, which maybe I was not so clear about it.
Fine.
Okay, so where is that merge pull request? So okay, I did merge this pull request here, so that's kind of available. What I'll do maybe after this meeting, I'll do the changes as we talked about and re-push these changes back into the main template, which is here, and that'll be available. As in, even if still today you don't want to say anything, but you want to make some changes on this, what we have discussed, go ahead and create a pull request. I'll be happy to talk about it in the next meeting if required. Okay, so what else that we should be, as in what next that we should be doing on this kind of, and guys, please speak up if you don't like this and want to go back to the old model of Q&A. I'll be okay with it. Or if you want to continue on this, that's also okay. Any thoughts? What next? I guess Sandeep said you had some thoughts last time we were talking about it, and I didn't make make a note.
I'm facing a strange scenario.
Okay.
I am supposed to extend the sale price, new sales price experience. The problem is it has to be based upon the lot numbers, item tracking. So first question is technically if we can do it or not. Uh,
Um.
Because
Okay.
the
So
field is not available in the sales line or sales header. That's the problem.
right, and it's, if I'm not wrong, because I haven't spent much time, but if I'm not wrong, it's done with the interfaces now, the new sales pricing.
Yes, but it does take care into anything which is available on sales header or sales line.
Agreed, but what I'm thinking, and I don't know how intensive that dev that you're looking for, but with the interface and picture, you can actually have your own sales pricing completely written without touching the Microsoft code.
Yeah, that is true. I handled it. In fact, I did follow example given by Microsoft on the site where they have done it based upon say location wise price.
Okay.
So I was able to achieve that. Um, in they have given example of pricing experience 15. Now the pricing experience 16 is running.
Right.
So I was able to handle that as well. But the thing is, this field's lot number because it's item tracking, it's not
Yeah.
available on the main line table.
Yes. Hmm.
So
I'll
it
have to think
becomes
about it.
tricky. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you can.
Yeah, sure. And Vikas, you want to say something? I see your hand raised.
Yes. Hi, Saurabh. Hi,
Hi.
hello everyone. Yeah.
Hello.
Saurabh, as the series of events is going, so I had a question. Actually, a few days before, I came across a scenario like on a table. We wrote we subscribe a table trigger like on after delete. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm using like bulk deletion, like I'm calling delete all.
Mm-hmm.
So what actually it was some kind of performance tuning I was doing on that, and using the performance profiler, I found like using while I was using calling delete all that,
Mm-hmm.
and after and the sub on that table on after delete event was called in some another coordinate as a subscriber.
Right.
Uh, then what from the delete all, we expect that there will be a single SQL statement would execute for the all the records. But using the SQL, sorry, nav profiler, I checked. I found that for all the records that subscriber was calling,
It.
the that subscriber event was calling, and that were reason means that were causing performance delay during my this delete statement. But
Right.
the for the same code, I removed the subscriber and checked the same with using the performance profiler. There was a around 70 to 80% reduction, sorry, increase in the performance. The performance was very good after removing the subscriber. So just I wanted to know that do you have any kind of scenario, any kind of solution, workaround that I want the event to be there, but the performance should be the way like it works on the single execution of the delete all. So do you got such scenario? Do you came across such scenario?
There are two things on it, and I'll have to find it. But the one thing is that, and others can correct me if I'm wrong. I have read somewhere on MSDN, and that's why I'm saying I'll have to find it, that Microsoft suggests that if you do bulk deletion, especially or not just the deletion, but if you do modify all or delete all, those
Yeah.
will have bad performance, even if there are no subscriber, technically speaking, as per Microsoft. I'll have to find that, and I'll maybe post it on once I put this on YouTube. I'll find it if I can. But I remember I read it somewhere. That's one. Now, to your scenario, I'm not sure, but maybe the partial record logic that we have talked about last year, which is in 2022, uh, based on partial record, it does work on the file set. It does work on other situation. I haven't tested it on delete, but the way it works is it only fetches, but it will not skip the subscriber. The
It will
subscriber
never
will
skip the subscriber.
yeah,
It will always run it for per record.
it will
Yes,
have to.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
it
it
will
is
have to.
executing for per record.
It will have to. I guess
Actually,
that's the
actually,
does it.
this scenario I noticed on NAV 18, NAV 2018, and I was using that on delete subscriber, and just using the profiler. It was I checked the statement. It was the latency was caused just because of that subscriber only.
Yeah, because
So
you need to understand it as we were talking about a little while ago about the validated statement. In this AL model, your event is not the sorry, your extension is not the only extension in that environment. And maybe it is, but not in every environment, right? So Microsoft will have to deal with these kind of uh, requests and not just deletes or every situation. Microsoft has to go and look for who all are subscribing to this and then tell everyone that hey, Vikas is trying to delete a record. Do you have to do something? And they say, yeah, I have. And then their code will take priority or precedence before your delete happens. So, they can't just be looking at your extension. That's for sure. They will have to call all the events that are being subscribing to that particular situation that you're trying to modify.
So, as of now, we don't have anything that we can skip that particular subscribers during using like modify all or delete all. We don't have any, is it?
Yes, because that breaks the whole idea of
Extensions.
yeah, of extensions, right?
Not only extension, but if you look it from a different point of view, how the SQL will be queried. Microsoft does not know what you are doing on that extension where you are subscribing. You may be inserting some records, you may be deleting some records in the subtables. So Microsoft cannot have a clubbed statement for all those records. So it will always has to run per record if there is a subscriber.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
how it is.
that I agree with you. Yeah, that I agree with that. It should be and it should be executing per record per execution. It should.
So the only way I have been able to handle wherever there is a bulk is running a loop of say 50, 100 records and then committing once in a blue moon, every loop, so that the RAM is not consumed too high. That's the only solution I found. TempDB otherwise goes out of limit if there are too many records.
Yeah, this has been a thing from the time NAV started using events. Like if you try to delete something like this on NAV 2015, it'll have a better performance because it's not looking for any subscribers. From 2016 and onwards, where Microsoft introduced all events and all, that's where the compiler started looking for anyone who is subscribing to it. You can try on BC14, try to delete a sales order or try to release it. How many Microsoft events are being called for those situations is endless.
Yes. Yes, and number of graph coordinate and we can
Right.
say number of API coordinates. It just goes into loop and events. We can see and actually, while working on the performance, so I checked. Yes, you are right. There were a huge number of events it was executing.
Yeah.
But and lastly, just I had to remove that on that subscription subscribe code that only
Mhm.
work. But after removing that and the delete all, it resulted in a 80% increase in performance. That was thing that was
Yeah, but
I
it was your code, that's okay, but think about a possibility where your extension was the is dependent on some other extension. So you may be
Yes.
able to remove your code, but if somebody has already taken a kind of a dependency on your extension, then their code will execute in either case.
Yes. Okay, I got your point. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fine. Few ideas for
Yes, sir.
attachment management in custom tables is another where I feel people will find it interesting. And I was reading some blogs where they were saying storing data into uh, for attachment data into Azure Blob Storage. Those kind of things will be pretty interesting.
Okay. Yes. So first we want to do what the attachment management in custom tables.
In custom or wherever Microsoft has not provided, like bank account, anything. Matlab, it's an
Okay.
open vote.
Because I was kind of looking at it, and I have an open ticket at my end to kind of work on it to on the similar lines of having documents instead of attachment management go into SharePoint online.
OneDrive or SharePoint.
SharePoint, because that, or maybe OneDrive, that's more or less one on the same thing, both from Microsoft Space, right? So I'm pretty sure if, and I don't know how to write it right now, but I guess it's a very common thing in the NAB world, and our customer are using it for sure. So when they come for upgrade, and I'm being selfish, come for upgrade, they will require a solution which can replace those scenarios where people used to write to a folder and then the file will get saved into that specific folder rather than getting downloaded. So things like that.
Zetarox does it.
I think there is a MS extension also that saves on OneDrive. Actually, even
Um,
we
that's it.
also developed some extension for OneDrive, but I think MS already provided saving on
MS,
OneDrive
No, it's
MS.
not
on
direct
App
save.
Store.
It's
Um,
not. Yeah, it's just copying it there and opening it from there,
yeah.
right? So the idea was that when you click on a document which is on your attachment, it actually downloads it and then you have to open it. And what Microsoft did with that extension is they said open in OneDrive. So what it does, it copies that file from your attachment and copies it, doesn't move it to OneDrive. And then because it's in OneDrive, you might be using Office 365 and not have Office online. Oh, sorry, Office on your machine. It'll still open it there. So you don't have to download the file, it just moves it, copies it there. But
Okay.
yeah, there might be something there that we might be able to use instead of copying it. We might be, when we are uploading it, we might directly place it. I don't know yet. I'll have to search for it. But
There's a free vertical that comes in Zetarox. Use it. That actually stores the
yeah,
files on the on the SharePoint.
yeah, that comes from, I forgot the name. Z
Equisys.
Z
Equisys.
Zetadoc have stopped providing that now in the free version. They used to, but there's one more that one of our customers is using. I forgot the name now. But I'll have to think about it, but I know, and that's not available on prem. That's only available SaaS, and it's a free extension on SaaS, and it does. And there is a paid extension from our MVP, which I again forgot his name. I'm so bad with names, man. We have this paid extension which can does a lot more just than copying and all. But yeah, I'm talking about those small situation where people run a job queue, its file gets stored in a folder, and then they kind of review it there. And the idea is to kind of handle those kind of situations.
I
So
think
you want to save it in SharePoint or OneDrive? Where
Let's do it
probably I
one
can
drive.
write some code because I've done the coding on storing it in the SharePoint
Huh?
in
So
2016.
I also did some, I mean, so saving reports on OneDrive. from SAS version. Reporting is turning PDF files and saving on OneDrive.
Okay. So, okay, let's try both. What's the call? As in, we can always merge that code, in our one extension and place it there. So whosoever is interested in whatever, as in, if you are interested in SharePoint, go ahead and let's do it on SharePoint. If you are interested in OneDrive, let's do it on OneDrive, and let's review it together.
And also in blob storage, another dimension.
Yes, also in blob storage, but the only limitations are that there will be that people who have the account, they will be able to, right? That's, I guess.
Well, let's have the option. Let's have the code
Yeah,
ready
right.
in the
Yeah,
extension.
let's have the code ready for all three scenarios. And yeah, whatever you like, or whatever situation that your customer uses most, either OneDrive, Azure Blob, or SharePoint, let's start doing dev on that and let's see. So what I'll do is, in the same um, repo, I'll add one more option to kind of add one more project into it, so that we can use it for storing this code.
Don't we have multiple apps in that
Yeah, so
already?
that's what there are multiple apps. I'll just name the other app
Okay.
as file, file
Okay.
attachment or something like that. So right now it's only one, but there is actually app 2 and 3. So I'll just name that, and then it'll be visible here in this. Okay, so let's next week let's define what everybody is doing, and if someone has something, you can just come here tomorrow. I'm pretty sure I'll be done with that after this meeting. Come here tomorrow, you'll see that folder again. You can clone it. Once you think that this is all what you can do, just do a pull request, and next week we'll meet again. So what you have to do is fork. I keep on saying clone this. Fork, and then at the end you do a pull request. Okay.
Thanks, Saurabh. The
Thank
session
you.
was wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, let's see you next
Thanks,
week.
Saurabh.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, man.